Hey guys, my name is Alisha. Welcome to my channel. So today I'm going to be doing a bit of a fun video. Basically, this is a if you like this book, you'll like this TV show kind of, I don't know if this is a tag or whatever, but yeah, so basically it's a recommendations video. I watch a lot of TV and I also read a lot of books, so I think it's fun kind of seeing the similarities and the differences and like seeing, just kind of how like themes and stories and like plots can sometimes seem similar. And then obviously if you liked a certain aspect of a certain book, or let's say the TV show, you might also like, a different book or a TV show or a movie or, things like that. So also like by no means is this like definitive, like nobody has done, research and found out if these are actually similar. These are just things that I found maybe from the book or from the TV show that I felt, really worked well and seemed similar in both of those things. So yeah, just kind of recommending for random things. Anyways, let's get into it. So first on my list, I have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V. Schwab. So this is a pretty popular book. A lot of people, of course, have read it, and I know a lot of people have loved it. I personally didn't love this book. I thought the writing style was really great, and I thought, especially at the start, the themes of Addie and, why she did what she did was really, like, a really great theme and an in-depth kind of view of, like, what a lot of women, especially back in the day, had to go through. So I did love those parts of this book. So the TV show that I'm thinking and recommending for this book, if you like this book, I think you will love Dickinson. So this is a TV show, fairly new. I think it's season 2 just came out last year, maybe. It has Haley Steinfeld as Emily Dickinson. So basically what that TV show is about is, of course, about the famous poet Emily Dickinson, and kind of it's taking a really modern spin on not only her life but as well as like issues of kind of society and gender and sexism and the patriarchy, and like yeah, really like looking into those themes and seeing how Emily Dickinson herself kind of I guess like worked around it and became the woman and the poet that she was. So yeah, I think basically what I found really interesting about the book and that show is the kind of commentary on what it means to be a woman. And of course, I think this book takes place sometime in the 18th century, if I'm not mistaken. It might even be before that, maybe 17th. I don't know, but basically it's olden times. And so what Addie LaRue, especially at the start of the book, what she has to go through, so basically she's being forced into this arranged marriage and she's pretty young, and she wants more out of life. She doesn't want to just go get married and start a family and like be the traditional mother and woman that she's supposed to be and what society tells her to be. And just like that, Emily Dickinson in the TV show, as well as in real life, I'm assuming, had to like kind of go through the same stuff. Like a lot of people told her she couldn't be a writer and she couldn't do the things that she wanted to do. But she kind of persevered and she fought against the patriarchy and against what people told her that she can't do to, go be super famous. Everybody knows who she is today. So I thought those two themes were really similar in both these mediums. And yeah, I think what I love about the TV show is the kind of modern spin on it. There's a lot of, I know a lot of people don't necessarily love those things when you have a period piece and, they're using modern music or modern language and stuff, but I think that really made the TV show easily accessible and more fun to watch. And just like that, I think, V. Schwab's writing also, gave this book a really like old-timey feel, but made it modern and accessible and interesting for readers today to fall in love with. So yeah, I think you should definitely check that show out if you love this book. So next up I have Legend Born by Tracy Dion. So this was a really fun read. I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars and I really did love this book. Basically what this is about, if you haven't read it, it is a young black woman who is attending, I think, UNC, and she's still in high school, but she's doing this kind of year at college or taking college classes, something like that. But she ends up stumbling across a kind of secret society, and it's predominantly white. And basically, it has to do with it mixes in like the Arthurian legend. So of course, of like King Arthur and Merlin, and you know, magic and all of those things. So the secret society basically deals with these kind of magical things and keeps it away from humans. And so she, I believe, I'm forgetting the main character's name. Bree. Okay, so Bree, yeah, basically has to deal with a lot of racism, a lot of sexism, and kind of dealing with being, I think, the only Black person in that society, and you know, make like feeling like she is worthy of being there and she's valuable and she deserves to be there. So I feel like a lot of those themes really resonate with just obviously life in general, you know, withholding the magical aspects. But a lot of, you know, people of color, especially Black people, do have those feelings of like when you get into a space that isn't, you know, what people tell you that you should be allowed to do, such as, you know, going to university, getting, you know, a high executive position at work, you know, things like that, which are, you know, predominantly white males in those positions in those areas. Yeah, you have a little bit of like imposter syndrome and stuff like that. So basically, if you like this book, I think I have two TV shows recommend for this book. Number one being Dear White People. So this is a really just absolutely great show. I loved it when it first came out. I think it might be ending or it has ended. I think there was 3 or 4 seasons. But yeah, this show is basically about a group of students who are Black and who are attending this kind of predominantly white school, but they have their own kind of society. Not a secret, but it is basically a group of Black students that are trying to fight against the kind of racial injustices that they face, dealing with a lot of those themes of, you know, racism and sexism and being in positions of power and being told that they can't do things because of their skin color, and things like that. So I really love that both of these, you know, this book and this TV show deal with those topics, and especially like Legendborn wasn't, you know, like a funny book. It was pretty hard hitting, and like it is a YA fantasy, so I think it did like a really good job of dealing with those issues, but also weaving it into the story really well. Whereas Dear White People is a comedy, it's more of like a dark comedy, but yeah, it just does such a great job of, again, talking about those issues, but also making it relevant to the story and, you know, keeping it funny and lighthearted, but also like really, really poignant to, you know, what society is facing. So that's my first recommendation. Number two, if you liked the kind of Arthurian legend aspect of Legendborn, I think you should definitely watch Merlin. So this is a TV show. It's based out of the UK. It honestly is pretty old now, and I have only really watched, I think, the first 2 seasons, but this was, I think, the OG kind of Arthurian legend adaptation in like at least kind of modern day, or at least like my modern day. But I think this, again, it's really old, so if you're, you know, a critic of CGI and things like that, maybe don't watch the show because it is old. You know, they didn't have a lot of those things, but I think it's a really fascinating show. I think it's a really interesting show, and it does a really interesting job of talking about the Arthurian legend and incorporating aspects of obviously the magic and dragons and things like that. So yeah, definitely check out both these shows if you liked Legendborn. So next we have one of my favorite books ever. I am constantly talking about this book and I just absolutely love it, but that is Gods of Jade and Shadow by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. So this book is, the writing, impeccable, you know, the plot, amazing, the characters, so fleshed out, so developed, and the romance, just so good. Everything about this book is so amazing. So if you haven't read this book, I highly recommend this book. But basically what this is about, it's about, it also takes place in, I think the 40s or the 50s, but it has to do with a young girl named Cassiopeia, and she is pretty much bogged down by the patriarchy. She is kind of like her grandfather's like slave. She has to do everything he says. He doesn't like give her any freedom, doesn't allow her to do anything she wants. She has to take care of him, look after him, and not in like a, you know, familial way, like in a honestly mean and just like he puts her down a lot. And then she also has to deal with her cousin, who is very, again, just like really thrives on patriarchy, pretty much. He is always putting her down and always making sure it's known to her that, you know, she doesn't have a voice and she can't do anything. Until one day she basically stumbles across this kind of case or something full of bones, and she accidentally opens it, and then out pops out the god of death, or I believe he's the god of the underworld, something like that. So they basically have to go on this quest because they're forced into kind of saving each other in a way. And then, yeah, along the way, you know, a lot of things happen. Maybe some romance happens. And yeah, there's a lot of just like really nice kind of banter and, you know, some tension and some fun moments, some romantic moments, as well as this book does tie in kind of Aztec and Mayan mythology. So the god of the underworld is the god of Zabalba, which is the Mayan term for the underworld. And yeah, I really love that aspect of this book too. But the show that I'm recommending is more to do with kind of like the god of the underworld, stuff like that, and like the romance part, and that is Lucifer. So Lucifer is a, I would say, pretty popular show. I feel like a lot of people have watched it, but if you haven't, it's basically about Lucifer, who comes down to Earth and is kind of like this party guy, and he's like taking life easy, and like he wants to basically see what it is to be a human because he's tired of ruling over hell. And so he somehow ends up working with this detective, and they kind of start this partnership. And again, there's a lot of will they won't they, and a lot of it's also like really funny, really cute, really romantic. It is a very slow burn, so if you're not into that, maybe don't watch the show. But what I thought was really similar between these this book and this TV show, is the fact that, you know, obviously we have Lucifer, and then we have like the god of death, underworld, that whole aspect. But I thought the kind of relationship that the god of death in Gods of Jade and Shadow had with Cassiopeia, the main character, and that Lucifer has with the detective, it was really similar. And it really just really, while I was reading this book, it really just reminded me of this TV show, and I love this TV show. So when I went into reading the book, I not only just immediately loved the writing and the plot itself, but yeah, like just those aspects of the romance and the characters just really reminded me of each other. So yeah, I would highly recommend both these things, but this book is amazing, so you have to read it if you haven't. So next on my list, I have Wings of Ebony by J.L. So this is a new release from 2021, and I did read it, I think in like February or March. But basically this is about a young girl named Rue, whose mother has recently been murdered, and she finds out that she is half god, half human, and her father, who she hasn't known all her life, is actually a ruler in this magical country. And so he comes and he kind of takes her away to this magical country, and she's dealing with like all these things, you know, magic related and like being a demigod related in this country, whilst also kind of moving back and forth between her own kind of city. I believe she was in Houston, and so she's going back and forth between this new magical country and her hometown, and dealing with these kind of issues in her hometown. She also has a sister that she's left behind, who she's very protective of, and just a lot of like issues dealing with kind of, you know, the Black community and her own community, and being kind of a source for good and for like helping out her community and being there for her community, whilst also obviously like dealing with all these new magical aspects of her life. And so this book, while reading it, nothing to do with like the really fantasy magical elements, but it really reminded me of All American, which is a CW show. But it's actually like a really good show, and I like really love the themes and the topics that the show discusses. I think it does a really great job of kind of like Wings of Ebony, where it's talking about like issues in the Black community and issues in America, you know, racial inequality, housing, education, things like that. So yeah, the book, I think, I also felt this way while reading the book, but I did think that like, if you're looking for a fantasy heavy read, this isn't a great book, because I do think that the fantasy aspects of this book weren't great. I think it could have done a lot more to really flesh out this magic and this world, and you know, Rue, the main character, going back and forth and dealing with all of that. But what I think it did a great job about was talking about, again, those issues of being a Black person in America and dealing with racism and, you know, all those different aspects, which All American does a great job of. This show is actually about a young boy who is a football player at a relatively lower school than, you know, where the richer, affluent neighborhood is. And so he basically gets recruited to come to this more football intensive and like better school in a way. And so while he's there, he kind of is dealing with, you know, wanting to give back to his own community and being there for his people, whilst also kind of, you know, furthering his dreams and his career and being a football star. And yeah, so just dealing with all of those things. So I think those aspects were really similar in both these things. And yeah, definitely check this TV show out. So next up, I have The Beautiful Ones by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. So we have another Sylvia Moreno Garcia book. I have read this book and I didn't love it, I will admit. I loved a lot of aspects of it, and especially the writing, but I didn't think it was as good as some of her other work. But what this book, well, before I get to the TV show, let me tell you what this book is about. Basically, it is about a young girl named Nina who is just entering kind of the age where she's about to go get married, and she is basically a socialite and having to participate in the grand season. And so she's, you know, going to court and like balls and things like that where she's trying to find herself a husband. And so while all of that is happening, there's a man named what's his name? So basically while all that's happening, Hector, who is a man who has kind of like worked up through the ranks to become a socialite. So he wasn't always kind of rich and a eligible bachelor, you know. He had to work his way there. And he has now entered also the grand season, so he's looking for a wife. But there's also this other character named Valerie who is kind of jaded, and she's had to deal with kind of some heartbreak. And there is some history between her and Hector that Nina is unaware of, and you know, she starts having feelings for Hector. So there's a lot of drama in this book. There's a love triangle, and yeah, so basically what this book reminded me of is Bridgerton. So this, of course, is a very popular Netflix series that recently came out, I think last year, and also a book series. So I haven't read the books, but I did watch this TV show, and this TV show takes place in the Regency era in London. Again, has to do with socialites and debutantes and, you know, the grand season of, you know, looking for love and finding a husband and all of those things. But obviously what I think a lot of people love about this show is the drama and the romance and all of those things, which I think The Beautiful Ones did do a pretty good job of. I personally think, you know, I, as a lot of people do, like love triangles are really hard to get right. So I don't know if they, you know, this book succeeded with the love triangle, but I think the drama of everything going on and the romance was just really reminiscent of Bridgerton, and yeah, gave me a lot of Bridgerton vibes. So if you did like Bridgerton and you want, you know, something in that world kind of, then this would be a great book to pick up. So next up I have Finlay Donovan is Killing It by Elle Cosimano, I think. But I recently read this book and it was such a fun time. I really loved this book. It basically is a murder mystery, but it's a really like funny and humorous read. Like the main character is a single mother, and so she's, you know, dealing with taking care of her kids and dealing with a problematic husband, let's say, and then ends up basically she's a writer, and so she's at this Panera Bread and just talking to her agent about her upcoming book, and basically that conversation gets miscued and twisted by somebody who's overhearing, who accidentally basically believes that Finlay, the main character, is a hit woman, and so she hires her to kill this man. And so through an unfortunate series of events, basically Finlay has to deal with now a dead man that she may or may not have killed, and just things keep on like snowballing, and you know, it's just a comedy of errors. And she also has sort of an accomplice, her partner in crime named Vero, who is her babysitter, and she gets pulled into dealing with this murder and kind of helping Finlay deal with it and figure things out. So yeah, I love their dynamic. I love Finlay as a character. I loved, the story was honestly hilarious. I really did laugh out loud a lot of, during reading this. So I highly recommend this book. But this book did remind me a lot of Dead to Me, which is a Netflix show. I believe it has 2 seasons out and is going to have more. But this TV show was such a kind of surprise. I wasn't really like expecting much from when I first watched it, but it was just so much fun, a great time, and honestly had a lot of the same vibes as this book. But basically what the TV show is about is a woman who has recently lost her husband to a hit-and-run car accident. And so she doesn't really believe that the police is doing enough to solve the murder. And so she kind of wants to take her own hand at trying to figure out what happened to her husband. And so she's accidentally, or I guess not accidentally, but she like meets this woman in a grief group like while they're trying to deal with their losses. And so these 2 women kind of strike up this odd friendship and become really close and, are really good friends suddenly. But what they don't know, what the main character, Jen, I think her name was, doesn't realize is that her new friend is hiding this really big secret from her. And so while they're dealing with like their own grief and their own loss, they're also trying to figure out what happened to Jen's husband, and then dealing with like some secrets. And yeah, it was just a really like fun, it's like a dark comedy show, and it just has a lot of aspects that I loved about this book. And both of them are a bit of like a murder mystery and just really dark comedy, funny reads, and great characters all around. So definitely check out both of these. And so the last book on my list is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So this is another one of my absolute favorite books. I loved reading this. I read it recently and just haven't stopped thinking about it since. But it's basically about Evelyn Hugo, who is this kind of reclusive Hollywood star who's now in her 80s or 90s. And she's been really kind of silent on her life and why she did some of the things that she did, that she was famous for, including her 7 husbands. So all of a sudden she decides to hire this really rookie journalist to write her memoir. And so through kind of the journalist and Evelyn telling the journalist her story, we as the readers find out who Evelyn Hugo's 7 husbands were, who was the actual love of her life, why she decided to marry, all 7 of them, and just really a lot of different aspects of Evelyn Hugo's life. While also there's like a bit of a mystery aspect where we don't know why Evelyn chose this journalist, because she specifically chose this one person, and we do find out later on in the book why that was. So this book, just so amazing. I'm sure a lot of people have read it because it is really popular, and I believe it came out in 2017, so it's been a few years. But Taylor Jenkins Reid's writing is so amazing and so just really gets you in your feels, I definitely cried while reading this book, and just so many emotions. And one of the biggest things that I loved about the book was the fact that while reading this, you honestly felt like Evelyn Hugo was a real person. Like she was a real Hollywood star that like we don't know anything about, and like through this, like this itself being kind of a memoir, we're learning about Evelyn Hugo and like who she was as a person. So I just really loved it. But I have 2 TV shows again to recommend with this book. First being Hollywood, which is a, I believe, miniseries on Netflix and came out a few years ago. But basically this TV show takes place, I think, in the 40s, and is on just dealing with Hollywood itself as a kind of system and a society on its own, with its own rules and its own constraints, and basically what people are willing to do to get their dreams and to make it as a Hollywood star. And so I just really felt that like Evelyn Hugo again has to do with like Evelyn Hugo's life. So when she's 80, we start back when she was, I think, like 16 or 17. So I think it was like sometime in 30s or 40s, and then goes through her life in the different like throughout history. So a lot of the book does take place in, I want to say, 40s, 50s, 60s, like around that time period, which again is really reminiscent of Hollywood, TV show, because again that TV show just did, I think, a really great job of showing different aspects of not only Hollywood and what people can do to try to achieve their dreams, and like how there's a lot of manipulation and lies and deceit, and how, yeah, like what people had to do. But it did a really great job of showing the 40s and the 50s. And I don't know about other people, but I love when books or TV shows or movies kind of do these like period pieces, and you get to see how the world worked, and especially with Hollywood, which is like the behind the scenes of Hollywood, which is something, you know, a lot of people don't know a lot about. And so I love like reading or watching things that show those different aspects. And then secondly, the other TV show that I would recommend is Why Women Kill. So this is a anthology series, and I specifically am talking about the second season, which is currently coming out. So I think there's like 4 or 5 episodes out, but honestly, as soon as I started watching the show, the first 2 episodes even, for specific reasons, because this show is different than obviously this book, but that show, the second season, deals a lot with beauty and women who are maybe not in their prime, how they're dealing with, you know, coming to terms with who they are and what beauty means to society, and especially back in the day. And so I think those kind of themes were interspersed in this book, because obviously Evelyn Hugo, you know, as we go through her life, is getting older and is not, you know, the same as she was when she was younger, and she's not as wanted by, you know, producers and directors and fans and, you know, the world. And so part of the book is her coming to terms with, you know, she's not as, according to the societal standards, she's not as beautiful as she once was. And so, you know, maybe she's not getting the same roles or those kinds of things. And then in the TV show, one of the characters, Rita Castillo, is kind of dealing with that as well. So she's dealing with, you know, maybe not being as beautiful and as attractive or as wanted, and how she deals with that and comes to terms with that. So yeah, basically those are 2 TV shows that I think were pretty reminiscent for some of the themes in this book. But of course, I love this book so much. So if you haven't read it, you really should. This is another one of those books that like really changes you after you read it. Like, everybody should definitely read this book. So again, I kind of just wanted to do a fun video, a recommendations video, where talking about different books that you should definitely read, but also, you know, different TV shows that if you love these books, you definitely might possibly love these TV shows as well, or vice versa. If you watch these TV shows but haven't read the book, like, check out the book. But yeah, I hope you guys like this video, and thanks for watching, and see you guys next time.